Breaking. Tonight, Britain witnessed something it hasn't seen in generations. A king brought to tears, not in private, not behind palace walls, but before the eyes of an entire nation. Moments after Prime Minister Keir Starmer delivered what many are calling the most brutal attack on the monarchy in modern history. The air outside Westminster fell silent, yet inside the chamber, fury erupted. MPs shouting, aides whispering, and one question spreading like wildfire. Has Starmer just declared war on the crown? Within hours, social media exploded. Down with the monarchy trended beside protect the king. It wasn't just politics anymore. It was a nation tearing itself apart. In the heart of London, under the shadow of Westminster, something sacred cracked. It began as a routine debate, the Prime Minister defending his Modern Britain reform bill. But then came the line that changed everything. Starmer's voice didn't shake, it sharpened. Britain cannot cling to ancient privilege, vote, he said, while children starve in modern poverty. The chamber gasped. Aimed not at policy, but at the palace itself. Those words cut deeper than any fiscal argument could. For a second, no one moved. Even his own MPs froze, sensing he'd crossed a line that history might not forgive. Within minutes, the royal household issued a statement, cold, brief, trembling with restrained fury. The crown serves the people, it read, but it wasn't enough. Cameras caught King Charles arriving at Clarence House hours later, eyes red, face pale. For the first time, the image of a monarch wasn't one of dignity, but devastation. Insiders whispered he'd been watching the parliamentary broadcast live when Starmer's words hit. He reportedly stood, walked to the window and simply said, "It's happening again." Those who heard of him knew exactly what he meant. The echo of his mother's fear during the fall of the Commonwealth, the weight of legacy under assault. The press descended like vultures. Front pages screamed of a kingdom under fire. The BBC tried to calm the storm, but tabloids fanned it higher, painting Starmer as the man trying to dismantle 1,000 years of British identity. Outside Downing Street, protesters gathered through the night, some waving Union Jacks, others tearing them apart. The sound of drums echoed down Whitehall. In pubs and train stations, the question was whispered over every pint. If the Prime Minister attacks the crown, what does that make us? Meanwhile, inside number 10, chaos reigned. Advisors urged Starmer to clarify, to soften, to apologise. But he didn't. He doubled down. The monarchy must answer to democracy, he told one journalist, and that phrase alone detonated like a bomb across morning radio. Buckingham Palace, caught between silence and defence, chose neither. Instead, sources said the king privately summoned senior aides, demanding an emergency meeting with the Archbishop of Canterbury and senior lords. For hours, the palace gates remained closed. The British flag flying not at half-mast, but looking heavier than it had in years. By the afternoon, rumours swirled that Charles had been seen in tears during the briefing. Some said it was anger, others said heartbreak. After decades of holding the kingdom together through scandal, loss and transition, the monarch now faced an enemy not from abroad, but from his own elected government. For older Britons, it was unthinkable. For younger ones, it was liberation. And for everyone watching, it felt like the start of something far larger than a political dispute. It felt like a reckoning with history itself. As Parliament prepared for a second day of debate, security around the palace intensified. The MI5 had quietly raised the national alert. Crowds were swelling, voices louder, tempers hotter. Britain hadn't felt this kind of tension since the Brexit divide. Only this time, it wasn't about Europe, it was about identity. Who rules Britain, the Crown or the Commons? And yet, behind those palace walls, one question haunted the corridors of power. If the king breaks down, who holds the nation together? What happens when the monarch cries and the Prime Minister doesn't blink? As dawn broke over London, the city felt heavier, as if the fog itself carried the weight of what had unfolded. The streets outside Buckingham Palace were lined with barricades, police units standing shoulder to shoulder. News crews camped out under umbrellas, their breath visible in the cold morning air. Across every screen in the nation, one image dominated: King Charles stepping out of his car. His face a mixture of exhaustion and disbelief. He didn't speak, he didn't wave. For the first time in living memory, the sovereign of the United Kingdom looked like a man cornered by his own parliament. Inside Westminster, the political temperature had reached boiling point. Keir Starmer entered the chamber to thunderous applause from his loyal MPs and visible discomfort from others. His words from the previous night still echoed across the country, but now they had become a declaration. The Prime Minister was no longer calling for reform, he was leading a revolt against the very foundation of the Crown's moral authority. Britain, he declared, cannot serve two masters, the people or the palace. It must choose. The opposition benches erupted. Some cheered, others stared in shock. Angela Rayner sat silently, her hands clasped as though she herself wasn't sure whether to applaud or pray. Minutes later, word spread through the press gallery. The King had requested to address the nation. The last time such an address had been discussed was during the pandemic, under very different circumstances, but this was not about health or policy. This was about survival. At Clarence House, aides scrambled to draft a statement that balanced strength with sorrow. Every word was weighed carefully, but every line read aloud, tested, rewritten. He cannot appear political, one advisor warned, but if he says nothing, it will look like surrender. By midday, an unconfirmed leak reached Sky News. The King's private letter to the Prime Minister. It was said to be handwritten, marked personal and urgent. In it, Charles reportedly pleaded for restraint, reminding Starmer that the unity of the realm depends not on power, but on respect. The letter ended with a haunting line that gripped the nation. Do not destroy what you promised to protect. Within minutes, #letter from the King was trending across social media. Commentators called it the most emotional royal intervention since Diana's funeral. Meanwhile, Starmer remained defiant. In a press conference outside Downing Street, he addressed the growing backlash directly. This isn't an attack on the King, he said, his voice steely. It's an awakening for Britain. But his attempt to sound visionary only deepened the divide. Crowds booed from behind barriers. Protesters waved placards reading "Hands off the Crown," while others shouted "End royal rule." Two sides of Britain colliding in real time. The sense of national identity was fracturing on live television. Inside the palace, royal aides described the mood as unbearably tense. Queen Camilla was said to be furious, Prince William livid. Reports emerged that the Prince of Wales had privately phoned senior military officials, seeking counsel on constitutional limits. That rumour alone sent tremors through the establishment. For the first time since the Civil War, the monarchy and government seemed to be standing on opposite cliffs, staring across a widening abyss. International reaction only fanned the flames. The White House expressed concern. The EU remained silent, and India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi called the situation a test of Britain's true democracy. Even the Kremlin issued a statement mocking the British crisis of conscience. Every headline screamed of decline. The empire eats itself, its crown under siege, a king versus parliament. Back in Westminster, whispers began of rebellion from within Labour itself. Senior ministers reportedly feared that Starmer had gone too far. Some demanded a private meeting. Others quietly began speaking to the opposition. The Prime Minister was losing allies by the hour, but he didn't seem to care. History will vindicate me, he told his team, his voice cold, distant, unyielding. As evening approached, the palace finally broke its silence. The King would address the nation at 8 p.m. sharp. The announcement hit like thunder. For hours, speculation dominated every corner of the internet. Would he abdicate? Would he retaliate? Would he beg for unity? No one knew. All that was certain was that Britain was about to hear the most consequential royal speech in a century, and somewhere inside Buckingham Palace, behind closed curtains, King Charles rehearsed those words again and again, knowing one sentence could either calm his country or break it forever. What will the King say when the entire nation is ready to explode? The hour arrived like the calm before a storm. At exactly 8 o'clock, every screen in Britain flickered to the same image. The royal crest, followed by the words, "Address from His Majesty the King." Across pubs, homes and silent living rooms, the nation held its breath. Then the camera faded in. King Charles III seated behind his desk, a single lamp casting a soft glow across the room. The silence was suffocating. You could almost hear the pulse of an anxious country waiting for him to speak. When he finally did, his voice trembled, not with fear, but with something deeper. My dear people, he began, throughout our history, this nation has endured war, hardship, and division. But never have we faced a test such as this, one that questions who we truly are. His hands rested flat on the desk. He didn't look down. He stared directly into the lens, speaking not as a ruler, but as a man watching his life's purpose unravel. The Prime Minister has every right to challenge tradition, he continued, but no one has the right to dismantle it without the will of the people. It was a speech measured in tone, but burning beneath with raw emotion. He spoke of duty, of legacy, of his late mother's promise that service is not domination. He warned that if Britain abandoned its heritage, it would lose its soul. He ended with a single plea: let us not trade unity for power. Let us not destroy what still binds us together, our belief that the crown serves all, not itself. Then, in an unexpected break from protocol, Charles removed his glasses, his eyes visibly red. I have always served you, he said softly. But tonight, I fear I have failed you. The broadcast cut to black. No anthem, no applause, just silence. And that silence roared louder than any speech in recent memory. Within minutes, London erupted again, not in riots this time, but in emotion. Crowds outside Buckingham Palace began to sing "God Save the King," their voices breaking through the cold air. Some knelt, others simply cried. Across the political divide, even those who wanted reform found themselves moved. It wasn't just a monarch speaking, it was a father figure pleading for his country's soul. But not everyone was moved to mercy. Inside Downing Street, Starmer watched the address with his inner circle. Sources later revealed he sat motionless, expression unreadable. When the speech ended, one advisor reportedly whispered, "He's turned the nation against you." Starmer's reply chilled the room. "No, I've shown them who's really in control." He stood up, straightened his tie, and ordered a press conference for dawn. That single act, that single decision, would change everything. By midnight, the streets were alive again. Royal supporters clashed with protesters. The Metropolitan Police reported dozens of arrests. The hashtag number sign, Stand With the King, reached 10 million mentions before sunrise. Yet within the echo of national unity came a darker whisper. Talk of constitutional crisis, whispers of emergency powers, and speculation that the military might soon be drawn into the debate. The monarchy had spoken, the Prime Minister had defied, and the balance of Britain trembled between them like a blade ready to fall. Behind palace walls, advisors urged calm. Prince William, sources said, wanted to confront Starmer directly, man to man. Camilla begged him not to. "This isn't a duel," she said, "it's a collapse." But William's loyalty to his father was unshakable. He saw what the public saw. A man humiliated for his duty, a king mocked for defending tradition. By dawn, reports surfaced that the Prince of Wales had made an unplanned journey to Downing Street, whether to reconcile or retaliate. No one knew. The country woke to headlines that felt like fiction. King breaks down. Starmer stands firm. Nation-divided Parliament was set to convene again, but the air was poisoned. Labour MPs faced threats. Royalists demanded resignations, and whispers of a vote of no confidence began to grow. The entire system felt fragile, a democracy colliding with its own history. Britain was no longer asking if it could survive this, but how much more it could take. And as the morning news rolled, one haunting rumour spread faster than any official update, that the king had written a second letter overnight, sealed and delivered by hand to the Archbishop of Canterbury. No one knew what it said. Some claimed it was his resignation. Others believed it was his declaration of resistance. What if the king's final letter isn't a goodbye, but the start of a revolution? Morning broke over Westminster like a battlefield after the smoke cleared. Quiet, grey, uncertain. Britain stood at the edge of something it had never faced before. The collapse of the unwritten rule that had kept its heart beating for centuries. The monarchy and the government were no longer symbols of unity. They were opposing forces staring each other down across the ruins of trust. At 8 a.m, the world's cameras turned toward Downing Street. Keir Starmer emerged, pale and composed, his eyes betraying the sleeplessness of a man holding the storm at bay. He stepped to the podium as reporters shouted questions, their voices rising like static in the winter air. Then came the moment everyone feared. The monarchy, he said, pausing for effect, is not under attack. It is simply under review. The words fell like thunder. Gasps echoed through the press corps. To the public, it sounded like an execution master's reform. Within minutes, the palace gates were swarmed by thousands. Crowds waved flags. Others held candles. Many simply stood, waiting for the king to answer. Inside, the mood was grave. Advisers debated constitutional boundaries, lawyers drafted emergency statements, and senior members of the Privy Council gathered in hushed panic. Prince William had not returned from his early morning drive. Some claimed he was meeting with military officials, others said he'd gone to St James's to prepare a royal counter-address. Then at 11:27 a.m, the BBC interrupted its broadcast. Breaking news though, the Archbishop of Canterbury has confirmed receipt of a sealed royal document. The second letter, it was real. The nation froze. Hours passed without word. Reporters camped outside Lambeth Palace, desperate for a clue. And then, as Big Ben struck noon, the document's contents were revealed. It wasn't an abdication, it was a declaration. I will not dissolve what time has preserved, the letter began. If the government will not protect the crown, then I shall protect the people. It was signed simply, Charles R. The king had invoked an ancient royal prerogative, a symbolic act, legally outdated but morally explosive, declaring that his duty to the nation transcended any parliament or prime minister. Constitutional experts called it the boldest royal move since 1649. Others called it madness. In the streets, the effect was instantaneous. Bells rang, crowds erupted, soldiers at the gates saluted as if the order had come from history itself. Across the country, the moment divided every household, every heart. Was this courage or defiance? Was it strength or desperation? Britain was now a stage where democracy and monarchy stood face to face, neither willing to bow. Inside Downing Street, panic turned to fury. Starmer summoned his cabinet for an emergency session. He's declared war, one minister whispered. No, Starmer replied coldly. He's declared theatre. He ordered the Attorney General to begin drafting a motion to legally limit the Crown's interference in state affairs. That phrase, limit the Crown, hit the headlines within minutes. The very foundation of British governance was now bleeding in public view. Meanwhile, royal supporters flooded central London. The Mall became a sea of red, white and blue. Chants of God Save the King drowned out the traffic. Some knelt before the palace gates. Others climbed lampposts waving portraits of Charles. For the first time in generations, the monarchy didn't seem like a relic. It felt like rebellion. The king had become a symbol, not just of tradition, but of resistance against a political order many saw as arrogant and corrupt. By evening, the world was watching. The US, the Commonwealth, even the Vatican released cautious statements. Foreign media called it Britain's silent civil war. But inside the UK, the truth was simpler. People were choosing sides. Families argued, MPs resigned, and civil servants whispered of divided loyalties. Rumours spread of an emergency session of the Privy Council that could trigger a constitutional freeze, essentially locking the government's powers until resolution. And through it all, the king remained unseen. He did not appear at the balcony, did not address the crowd, did not respond to Starmer's latest threats. But his absence only added to the myth. For a nation built on quiet endurance, silence had become the loudest scream of all. As night fell, the cameras caught one final image, the palace lights dimming one by one, leaving only the glow of the royal crest above the gates. Commentators speculated endlessly, but no one truly knew what came next. Was this the beginning of a new Britain, or the final twilight of the one it used to be? The government prepared its legal assault, the monarchy prepared its moral one, and between them 40 million hearts waited for dawn. When a king stands against his own prime minister, who truly rules Britain, and when the crown fights to survive, but how many pieces of the kingdom must fall?